Your listeners should not believe the lie that is taught and said that you can't get great financial results and still care and love your people. In fact, I think it's the opposite.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Keep the Change. I love it that I get to interview different people. To me, it touches my soul when I get to ask people questions and live their life for about 25, 30, 35, maybe 40 minutes. And today I've got a gentleman who I met at Maxwell International Certification, who is an author. He's a former CEO of Saab, of HFE Enterprises. He's an incredible leader, and he's an incredible friend now. And I'm just so honored that he would take the time to talk to me about leadership today at home and in the workplace. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you Joel Manby. Hi, Joel. Thank you for coming today.
How are you today?
Great, my friend.
Great day to be alive.
Oh my gosh. I can tell it is for you because you're in Naples, right? So it's really true for you.
It's always true. I had a football coach in high school that when we were doing like 2-a-days in August, doing dirt rolls in the pure mud, he'd always walk by and say, "Man, it's a great day to be alive."
That's funny. In Battle Creek, Michigan, right?
Battle Creek, Lakeview.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I've said that ever since.
Well, that is so true. I mean, I feel myself, and I know you feel this way, your book is an example of there's a lot of work to do, right? There's so much content in your book, and it's such a great story. And you and I have talked privately a couple times about, I believe automotive needs to hear this story, and you have an automotive background. And so I'm so excited to just at least, if nothing else, give a taste of the book and the impact that this book could have with private entrepreneurs at our dealership. So again, thanks for doing this. Joel, tell us about your accomplished, you went to Harvard, you've been a CEO of some incredible companies. Take a few minutes and tell the audience who Joel Manby is, please.
Okay. Well, as you said, I grew up in Battle Creek, and that's the cereal capital of the world in Michigan. It's where Kellogg started, and there was the smell of cereal in the air all the time. I used to ride my bike to the Kellogg factory and pretend I was part of another family to take the tour and then get the free sugared cereal at the end of the tour. My mom always wondered where I was. But anyway, I had a loving family, but we grew up really poor. And I think that's informative in the sense that I didn't grow up thinking about love and leadership, or it was a loving environment. But as far as approaching the rest of the world, I knew that if I was going to accomplish something, I needed to do it myself. I wasn't going to get financial help from my parents. I wasn't going to get a lot of guidance. So I was pretty competitive in that sense, feeling like I had to make it on my own. And I went to Albion College in Michigan. Then, as you said, went on to Harvard. But in between Albion and Harvard for business school, worked a couple years at General Motors because they had a scholarship program to pay my way to grad school. And that was the only place I interviewed that had that kind of program. There's no way I could afford to go to Harvard on my own. And so I was lucky to get a scholarship from General Motors to go there. So when I came back, I was trying to decide where I wanted to go. I went to Saturn, which was just a blast. And anybody on your podcast will remember Saturn and how successful it was for a long time. And the biggest thing I learned there, Bart, about just leadership and strategy is if you want to really break through in a business, you have to do something nobody else is doing and really cut an edge. And what Saturn did that people remember is they really invented one price shopping, right? No one was doing no-haggle pricing really in any kind of success level, and certainly not as a brand. And so to see Saturn break through and carve that out and have a verb called Saturnizing your dealership, and that was so much fun, and loved my time at Saturn. I ended up leaving there and actually going retail, owned 4 Saturn dealerships for a while, but then was asked to come back to General Motors in an international division. And yeah, I spent years in Europe, in Saudi Arabia, things like that on product strategy. But the culture at General Motors was so tough and I thought really bad. And the whole time I was there, I kept thinking, there has to be a better way to lead. Because I also grew up as a Christian. When I was 17, I became a believer. And so I believe strongly that Jesus' number one commandment is to love others. And we're called to do that all the time, not just at home and not just at church, but also at our work. And I certainly didn't see that at most retail operations, or certainly not within General Motors, and the way it treated its dealers had nothing to do with love or caring or respect. So my main point is I love my job. I love working at General Motors, but the culture was really tough. And then I got a really good lucky break. At only 34, was asked to run Saab North America, which was one of the younger people ever at that level at GM. And it was not because necessarily my talent as much as they wanted a Saturn person. And everybody at Saturn was young because none of the veterans at the rest of GM wanted to take part in Saturn because it was too risky. And so but as you know, Saturn had a so-so car, but great marketing and great distribution, great dealer network. Whereas Saab had the exact opposite, an amazing car, but really, for the most part, bad dealer network. I mean, there were some good ones, but it wasn't a focused dealer network. And they certainly had horrible marketing from the corporate side. And so that's why Saab wanted me. And I loved my time there, but again, the culture of mainstream GM really troubled me. And so you kind of hold that angst I was feeling about what I was seeing at General Motors, that when I actually left, this is a whole different story if you want to go on this track, and we won't right now, but I left Saab to go to an Amazon startup where we sold cars on the internet. And a lot of people don't remember that, but 2000, 2001, Amazon was selling cars until the implosion hit, and Amazon wasn't making money either. And so we were forced to sell in a fire sale to another company that had raised more cash, they raised cash pre-crash in 2000. And so I found myself without a job, trying to decide what the next step is. And that's when I just got this phone call from Jack Hershend, who's the owner of this theme park company. And I was already on his board. So I knew him, I knew the company, but shockingly, Bart, he asked me to come and join his company. And it was there that I learned about this loving, caring leadership that, by the way, got incredible financial results. I would say that point from a leadership standpoint was the changing point in my life. And it led to a lot of other things that we can talk about. But it was that angst in my soul that I felt. And when I saw HFE Enterprises and how they were run as a theme park company, I really wanted to be part of it. So instead of going back to autos, I became their chairman and eventually CEO. But to me, that caring, loving leadership was the link between my faith, which I wanted to execute at work, and being able to do so. When my whole time at General Motors, frankly, I never really figured it out. So that's my passion at a high level, is to talk about the love that Jesus shows us and how to make it work in a successful for-profit enterprise.
Oh my gosh. Are there nuggets there? Absolutely. One thing that really comes to mind, Joel, is, we talk about a lot, head, heart, hands, and feet. The head is how we think, the heart is who we are, the hands getting it done, the tactics, and the feet moving. I mean, the hands knowing how to do it, and the feet
exactly
moving our feet, right, and getting it done. And you come from such that place. I mean, you grew up, like you said, not a lot of money, but a loving home. So love was part of where you grew up. You went to Albion College. And what town is Albion?
It's in a town called Albion, Michigan. It's really small.
I know that college. I almost went there myself. And I'll tell you that offline sometime, but I did.
Well, I wanted to play for Michigan, but Bo Schemblecker wasn't calling me at the time. So I had to go to Division III and play if I wanted to play at all.
Albion had a swim team. And I ended up going to Ohio University, but I almost went to Albion this week.
Really?
Yeah.
They had a good swim team, good facility, actually. Well, maybe
Yeah.
not at the time, but they did later.
So but I'm so impressed with that. And then just God has touched your life. I mean, to go to General Motors,
Yeah.
General Motors offering a scholarship to go to Harvard.
Yeah.
And then you go to Harvard and obviously do very well and then go back into automotive. You had that in your blood, right? You had that part in your blood, and to be part of a startup and then for people to notice you at 34 years old and say, we want this guy to lead North America for Saab. Yeah. I mean, your track has been phenomenal. And one thing that you bring up in your book, and you were working with Greenlight, which is the Amazon company that people could buy cars online. It was called greenlight.com. You were working with them. You were home in California. Yeah. You had no pictures on the walls. You had no plants. You were in a temporary quarters building this company as CEO of this company during the crash. And you're sitting there, and the way you put it, you're on, you're so many numbers of glasses of wine at that point.
Or maybe bottles.
You could have kept drinking, but you thought, no, there's got to be another way. And then Jack calls.
Yeah.
And what I heard about all this is you are indeed touched, right? You've had favor, and it's hard for anybody to say, oh yeah, I've had favor. But my friend, you've had favor. But I believe that you and I get this. In your early part of your career, it was success, and you're very successful. And then now is the significance part. Because of the fact that you've been given such gifts, now you're giving it back. And again, I believe you gave it back with the writing of this book. I really do.
Well,
and the reason that I wanted Joel here was because I wanted to get to know him better. I'm selfish. But I also, if you're a car dealer, what Joel found, he saw it in Saturn, and he's going to tell you about this in a minute, but what he found with Jack Hershend is how to run a business with love. And that experience of running a business with love, you had mentioned to me, there's data to prove higher customer satisfaction, higher employee satisfaction, and higher return on investment. And why wouldn't we lead like this? So again, thank you for setting the stage for that. But what I think I want to do now, and again, we're going to be doing this more than once, but I want to talk about the book. And I want to hit on a few of these. But before we talk about the book, talk about one of your favorite people on the planet, your mama. And the message that your mom gave you one day that led to you being the leader, one of the things that led you to be the leader you are today.
All right, I'll tell you the story about my mom, but I also want to comment on what you said about, being blessed. I want your listeners, because every listener of this podcast has gone through a failure or will go through a failure. And to me, Greenlight was quite a failure. It wasn't really necessarily our fault. It was more timing than it was, I think, the idea. As in fact, Amazon's relaunching with Hyundai as we speak. They're going to get back into it 25 years later. But, I learned so much from that. And if that hadn't happened, the opportunity at Hershend would have never availed us. I would have never left my job at the auto industry to go into the theme park industry if I hadn't gone through this quote unquote failure. I was, as you said, I was on my knees, didn't know where to go. I had lost a lot of money because I invested my own capital as well as having stock options. And, I did have a drinking problem, just kind of wrestling through. So I don't want people to think everything was up and up all the time. This was catastrophic for me. I had just left a really good job with Saab and ended up in this mess. But because of that, ended up at Hershend, which was a huge blessing. And so I just want your listeners to make sure they know that for when they go through their own failure. But my mom really was the first one that really taught me the importance of encouragement. And I'll just tell the story quickly. I was on my way to a football banquet, and my dad was always working, so he wasn't with me, but my mom escorted me to the football banquet. And I was a senior and I was graduating and blah, blah, blah. Well, so people tended to know me because I played on Friday nights and they knew me, but I didn't necessarily know them. So two freshmen walked by and I was talking to my mom. So I kind of gave them the head nod as they said, "Hey, Joel, how you doing?" And I kind of gave them the head nod and kept walking. And my mom, who never really got angry, she just took me by the shoulders and turned me around and pointed her fingers in my chest and said, "You listen to me, young man. Every day, every time you come into contact with anyone, you have a chance to make their day better or make their day worse. And I don't think you made their day better." So he asked me to go. So I went back and I apologized to the guy. I said, "Hey, sorry, I didn't say hi." And I introduced myself and blah, blah. But that was the first time I really learned the value of encouragement. And then that continued because Jack Hershend taught me to write 3 letters every morning. It only takes 15 minutes to think about yesterday and just write 3 quick handwritten notes to people of what you saw yesterday that you want to reinforce. And I promise your listeners, I know that is so simple, but it is so hard to execute and so hard to do every day or every other day. But Jack does it every day. And you think about it, he's 93 and he started when he was 22. That's 70 years. 3 a day is like 1,000 notes a year.
Yeah.
That's 70,000. His notes are like gold. And so to all your listeners, like just for salespeople are working around the clock, they're working hard. Instead of just asking them how many cars they sold every single day, once in a while, write them a nice thank you note of the work effort they're putting in. It really makes a difference. So
I want to jump into that because I don't think like 99.9% of the folks listening to this would say, "Yeah, that's a cool idea," and never do it. Right. And we talked about this offline. My mom took over family business. I've told you all about that. But my mom, one of the things that she really believed was writing handwritten thank you notes.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that it doesn't matter the age of the person writing the note. In other words, if you and I send a text or we send an email, no matter what age we are, it does not have the same impact. Mm-hmm. If you and I write a handwritten note and put it on their desk, doesn't always have to be sent through the snail system. It might be handing it to them, right? Yeah, sure. We do that. It's an act of love in itself because it makes them feel good. And I think lives can change because of those. If you think about, maybe you've never received a handwritten thank you note, but if you have that had any thought put behind it, it's something that you remember today, right?
Most people keep. Yeah. I have a box of Jack notes that I will never throw away. I just can't throw them away. It's like getting a note from Dolly Parton, which I do because we ran her theme parks. It's like you just don't throw those things away.
I want you to talk about the theme parks and the Jack and his brother's enterprise before we get into the different chapters. Talk about these men, which just blows me away. He's 93, and I want to be just like him when I grow up, right?
They're great entrepreneurs. They literally started with a cave tour in Branson, Missouri. And because the lines to this cave tour were so long and they needed to spread their customers out, they started building little attractions that literally became a theme park called Silver Dollar City in Branson, Missouri, which is infamous in that region. It's one of the best regional parks in the country. They ended up partnering with Dolly Parton to do her massive theme park and all of her operations, the hotels. We partnered with another person to do all her dinner theaters. And so we have 21 different properties, but it started with Silver Dollar City. And then they added Dollywood, and then they grew and grew from literally 20 million in sales now. I mean, it's a private company, but I would say they're over 600 million in sales. Just huge. They're one of the largest privately held enterprises, certainly in the theme park business in America, if not the world. But yet they are so loving and dedicated to their employees. They have profit sharing. They were paying $15 an hour way before it was popular. Yet we had slightly, and this is important, I think, for your audience. Sometimes everyone wants to just grind down all the numbers, all the margin, all the salaries, all the costs. They had a much more expansive view of it, where they wanted low turnover, which we had virtually none. Our guest and employee satisfaction scores were the highest that we could find in the industry with publicly held data. And yeah, we paid people more, and therefore we had lower margins, but because we were smarter in the way we invested, we actually had a higher return on investment, even with lower margins than anybody else that in the, like Six Flags, Cedar Fair, or others. So and we can hit this more later, but your listeners should not believe the lie that is taught and said that you can't get great financial results and still care and love your people. It's in fact, I think it's the opposite, and the data says that. We had the highest guest scores, the highest employee scores, highest return on investment versus our competition. And there's so many other companies that lead with love like we did, like Chick-fil-A and the QSR industry. They do the same, or even Southwestern Airlines. It used to be that way, not so much today. So I just want to make sure the listeners don't turn off thinking about leading with love because they may not get the numbers. That's just a false narrative, but it scares people because they think, well, I'll be too nice and I won't get results. Well, you can't be nice all the time. You still have to hold people accountable, and you do so in a loving, caring way. And you still have to let people go, but it's just how you approach it.
Right. And what's interesting is you're a DC on the DISC scale, right? So if anybody knows about DISC, then that dominant driver, task-oriented, get stuff done, not always a great listener, but you're going to get stuff done. And you're a C, and you look at all details, you know numbers, you're task-oriented on both sides.
Yeah.
And part a little bit extrovert, maybe a little bit more introvert. Yeah. But the reality is that you have learned neither one of those are relational DISC patterns.
Right.
But you wanted to be a relational person in the realm of also getting results. But you didn't put results first. You put people first. Yeah. And what I find fascinating is that in the Saturn world, that was the philosophy was customer first. And customers were blown away at the process when it first came out, because they'd never been treated like that before.
Well, so Saturn had the number one guest and dealer satisfaction in the industry for 7 straight years. And including, they beat out Lexus and Infiniti, even in dealer satisfaction. But then, it started going awry when GM didn't give them any more product. And don't get me started on some of the dumb decisions made at General Motors in the 80s and 90s and 2000s. But that you're dead on right with your assessment there. So
yeah. And my question to you, I want to, again, I've got so many questions, but I want to ask you about the Saturn experience, because they were number one in resale and in that price point. I mean, they were number one or number two in about every major category. So what was the thing that you saw? Now, this is before you even met Jack. This was decade before, right?
I still had the desire in my soul. And, at Saturn, it was great leadership. It was Skip LaFoe who started. John Middlebrook followed him later on, was also excellent. Just really good, caring, smart business people. And he got up on stage. I'll never forget. Skip said, I want you to treat, and he said to the dealer body, I want you to treat every customer like you would treat your own grandmother, which is a really high bar, right? I mean, for most people anyway. And then but it's also how we were structured. We put dealers and union members on the board of Saturn. Now, the rest of GM would never think of that. And because of that, we made, group decisions, which took longer. There's no doubt it takes longer, but it was just a really good set of principles on how we made decisions. We had red, yellow, green flags where if you didn't vote green or yellow, if you voted red, you had a chance to sell the rest of people on your idea. And if you didn't, you had to get on board with the rest of the team. And if you didn't, it was like mutiny. Like you leave the room and you're all together. And there was those kind of cultural things that we were very clear on. Skip was very clear on, that made Saturn very different. And I still think Saturn made a huge, when they went bankrupt and the government stepped in and made GM take brands down in number, I still think they made a huge mistake getting rid of Saturn, because it could have been like a Tesla brand. It could have been a customer oriented brand. Instead, they chose to keep Oldsmobile, which was, really stupid.
What I find fascinating, again, your journey from Saturn, and then again, Jack seeing in you exactly who you are. He understood your character deeply. He was looking for a leader of character. And you had, again, that incredible experience with Jack as a mentor and a friend and a partner in your business world. And one of the things that happened with Herschen Family Enterprises is you got to be on a TV show. We didn't talk about the fact that we were going to talk about this, but I really want to go there. Give us a few minutes on what happened with Undercover Boss, because, by the way, folks, if you want to know who Joel is, you'll see his character by going to Undercover Boss and see who he is as a leader. It's fascinating. So give us a little bit of perspective of what that meant to you and being on that show, and also the lives that were changed from that experience, yours and theirs.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was an amazing experience. It's very risky because you sign a contract saying they can film anything they want. You don't get to see any of it before it goes on air. And once it goes on air, you're done, right? There's no editing. They can do whatever they want with the footage. So it's pretty high risk, but we trusted our employees so much that we wanted to do it, because we were just coming out of the 07, 08 mass recession, and we needed something to jumpstart and give us some energy. And we thought it'd be a really positive marketing thing, which it was. We were really lucky, Bart, because I talk about this in the book. The NCAA basketball quarterfinals or semifinals were played just before our show. So Duke Villanova, I think, and 25 million people were watching that semifinal basketball NCAA March Madness game. And then we came on, and 98% of the audience stayed to watch this Undercover Boss. So when we ended the program, my phone just lit up. And then we got so many emails at our server at Herschen that the server shut down, literally shut down, because we got inundated so much. And I have kept them to this day. I have a kind of 8 foot bookshelf of 3-inch binders with all these letters printed, because it meant so much to me and the company of what they said about our company. But the main point was they were looking for the type of culture that we had. And I remember earlier when I was explaining my time at the auto industry, how I had this angst in my soul that there had to be a better way to lead. It had to be better than what I was seeing at General Motors for the most part. Well, it turns out there's millions of people in America who are feeling the same way, and they were expressing themselves in their letters to me. And Bart, that's what led me to write Love Works. I didn't intend to be an author, but I realized I wasn't the only one that discovered this by being hired by Herschen, by being lucky to be there. All these other people saw it on this television program. And so I wanted to write a book so that other people didn't have to be 40 or 41 like I was when I came to Herschen and learned all this. I wanted 20 somethings and 30 somethings. And of course, you're never too old to learn new things. But that's why I wrote the book, is I wanted to get the message out there to people like me when I was 25, searching for that better way, but couldn't find it. And I think we've accomplished that with the book.
Yeah. Some of the stories and some of the compassion was phenomenal.
Well,
wasn't it though? I guess that just had to be so amazing. I've seen some of those other shows though, Joel, where they're just ripping their bosses, right? And that is not what happened with you. You found there's some people with some stories that you wanted to be part of, and you set the stage for that. That was
the interesting thing there, Bart, is if people who watch the show, we had a foundation that had just started called Share It Forward, where the employee has to give $1 first. $1 from the employee first, then the company matches that, and then the owners would match it. So $1 became $3, and we used that money to help employees in need. And that we did, instead of helping the community necessarily, we wanted to help our employees first. And then the people we helped in that show, like one person lost her house in a flood and we rebuilt their home. Albert was working full time. He wanted to finish out college, so we paid his way to school. None of those gifts were outside of the parameters of what we would give others with that foundation. I refused to give people things that weren't part of our normal process. In other words, I didn't want the fact that they worked for me or with me make them get special benefits. So, but it started the kickoff of that foundation. And now today, Hershen's giving partial scholarships, not only to every employee's child, every employee, but every employee's child, they'll get a partial scholarship to college if they work for Hershen. It all started with that Share It Forward Foundation, 20 years ago. But that's just one of the caring things that businesses can do that don't really take that much money, but it really makes people loyal.
I hate to, and that I don't have 3 hours to do this, but I'd like you to take me through the chapters and walk me through the principles. And again, you could spend an hour on each one, but kind of walk me through how love is defined and how you changed a culture and how somebody listening to this can change the culture in their business with these principles.
Sure, absolutely. At a high level, I think it's easier if the listeners think about do goals and be goals. And do goals are what every car dealership has, crazy amount of do goals, car sales, margins, F&I, back end, service contracts, service per car, all the metrics that we all have to hit. Every dealership has that. But what we did at Hershen is be goals. And that's what kind of leader we want to be. And so we defined our be goals as 7 words of love. We actually took them out of 1 Corinthians 13, which is a famous book written by the Apostle Paul. It's one of the few places in literature that actually defines what love means. And it's patient. Love is patient. Love is kind. And so we paraphrase it: patient, kind, trusting, truthful, forgiving, unselfish, and then dedicated. And I'll also say, just as a tangent, some listeners, when they hear love, the reason they get confused is they're thinking emotional love, like how you feel about your wife or your significant other or your husband or whatever your significant other is. But the Bible is written in Greek, and there's actually 4 different Greek words for love. Eros is a Greek word. That's the romantic love. Storge is love between a parent and a child. Philos is brotherly love, which is like what Philadelphia is named after. And then there's agape love, which this is the kind of love we're talking about. It's dedicated, it's forgiving, and it is unconditional. And it's how you treat people. It's not how you feel about them. So I wanted to get that right up front because people think it's all about emotion. That's because English is so limited with one word for love. We're talking about not feelings at all, but actions. How do you treat people regardless of the way you feel about them? So that's a really important point for your listeners to understand, to kind of get over the hump. But I'll just hit each word like with one idea. The truth is the book has 4 to 5 ideas for every word. We just don't have time. But on patience, I think the biggest issue for being patient, it's not being patient with poor performance. We have to hold people accountable. But it is what I would call praise in public and admonish in private, meaning be patient in how you take somebody to the woodshed. So many dealers I saw when I was in the field, or sales managers would kind of berate people publicly and embarrass them. And that just is never a good formula. Now you can take a whole team to the woodshed collectively over a certain issue, but you don't attack the person. And the Jack taught me that very well. So that's a big idea on being patient. On being kind, I think the one word is encouragement. And we already talked about that with Jack's letter writing, my mom's story at the football banquet. But what's crazy, Bart, and you've seen this, every dealership survey I've done or in the theme park industry, getting positive reinforcement is one of the lowest scores And yet that's free. It doesn't cost any money to be encouraging, but for some reason we don't do it. So I'd say for kindness, that's the word.
Let me throw in this too. Blanchard said it so good. Catch them doing something right.
Yeah, I love that phrase.
And one thing you say so well is admonish and praise. You're going to do both. And it doesn't mean you're soft, and it doesn't mean it's weak. And does it take more? Yes. But the results you've talked about long term, that's when culture changes. But I love the praise 3 times to admonish 1.
And we were taught an encouragement ratio under kindness that we tried to encourage. It wasn't scientific. We tried to think about, let's encourage 3 times more than we admonish.
Right.
Because let's face it, look, my best teachers, my best coaches, my best bosses admonished me.
Yeah.
They made me better.
Yeah.
But it never felt good. And it also felt really good when they would also say, great job.
Right.
And so that 3 times ratio is important.
I remember I had a football coach, Al Reva, that told me in 8th grade, you'll never make it. You're too small. And the problem with that was I never played after that. I swam, but I didn't play. I remember in 5th grade, I had a teacher who told me, you'll never sing. You have a lousy voice. Oh, wow. Because of that, I haven't sang. And now I have a pretty good voice. Just ask me. But the point is that that can happen with human adults too.
Sure.
Those things can scar people for life. Again,
they do scar people for life, and bosses can scar people for the rest of their life. I agree with you. It's like, don't listen to what people say.
Yeah. And again, though, I don't want, and you've said it so well, it doesn't mean there's not admonishment. It doesn't mean come in here, we got to have a discussion. But I love this. I think this is so strong. Valerie Burton, who is with Maxwell, talks about coaching. Number 1, you have to listen to be a great coach, right? You have to be a great listener. You have to ask great questions. Then you're going to build trust because you did those 3 things. And because those 3 things are done, listen, ask, and trust, now you can have direct communication, right? And that's because trust exists. I don't listen to people I don't trust, right? It's just the way it is. I'll get resentful, but I probably won't listen. So back to you.
That's really good stuff. And matter of fact, I'll just go to trust as the next word. You just hit on a really important thing. You got to have trust if you're going to have a loving environment. And I think the key word I would say there is delegation and letting people do their job. I see so many entrepreneurial dealers, sales managers that just micromanage, and great people don't want to be micromanaged. Great people want to be let go. Give me what you need from me, how many car sales, what margin you need, what F&I per car you need, and let me go get it done. I think that's a really important thing to gain trust, is to have strong accountability, but really clear responsibility. What does success look like?
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Truth is not, I don't mean like tell the truth or you get fired. I'm talking about, because everyone's get fired if they don't, cheat on the books or whatever. Truth is about telling other employees how they're doing, but do it in a way that maintains their respect and their dignity. Yeah. There's a whole section in the book I don't have time to go into about how to do that the right way, how to tell the truth to somebody in a way that builds them, makes them better, makes the dealership better, but also they won't quit the next day because of how it was handled. And I think it's really important to juxtapose patience and kind. That's on the nicer end. Trust and truth, you got to have that too. It's kind of like in the Bible where you have truth and grace. Patience and kind might be the grace part, but truth and trust, that's where the metal hits, the rubber hits the road. I'll say rubber hits the road, because that's what's going to get people better. Great leaders tell the truth to their employees.
Can I add something?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think truth too has to come from within. I think if we aren't true to our own selves, be true to thyself, then we're not going to be true to others. If we don't have those tough conversations with ourselves, we're not going to be able to have a tough conversation with somebody else. Great leaders promise themselves something, and they do what they promise themselves they're going to do. Yeah. And that then sets a standard for how they can lead others and help others do the same.
I love that. I agree 100%. I agree 100%, which can, in a way, leads to the word that no car dealership tends to talk about, most businesses don't, is forgiveness.
Yeah.
But the truth is, we all get angry at people at work. We have tension points. And if we can't learn to forgive, we're just going to be going through life carrying all these scars, ending all these, every relationship that ends because there's a lack of forgiveness on one side. Yeah. So we have to get over ourselves. And there's some great stories in the book about what happened with some forgiveness. And I won't take the time to tell it, but I can also say forgiving people doesn't always work either. I've had drug addicts and alcoholics I've given second chances to that it didn't work, but I'm really glad. In one case, I went to a man's funeral who drank himself to death. His 2 kids were there. I sure as heck was glad I gave him a few opportunities to succeed before he was let go, because everyone deserves that opportunity. So forgiveness is really important.
Let me throw something in, because I know you got to get going here, but let me throw this. I believe forgiveness too means, if you're not forgiving somebody, it's like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. I mean, come on, man. And, we live in a world where we're just angry at everybody. Grow a set. Say the 2 most powerful words in the English language, according to my friend J.E. Wolfington, is thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And
both.
I can't tell you how many times, because I make a lot of mistakes, that I say to people, hey, I'm really sorry. And I mean it though. If I make a mistake, I say I'm sorry. And I believe that's really developed relationships over the years. A lot of men, especially, we get ego. Oh no, I'm not going to say I'm sorry. Come on, man. They don't want to know how much you know. They want to know how much you care, and they want to know you're real, not right. We got to be real. And the authenticity of saying you're sorry is when people will flock to you like, what's that? Flies on
honey.
There you go.
I agree with you. Most egos of men don't allow us to do it. And I'll take it even a step further. It works really well with spouses. Not, sometimes they get tired of hearing you say, I'm sorry, when it's the 8th time.
Yes.
But I'm sorry I was wrong isn't just that I'm sorry, but it actually admits I screwed up. Either I took you to the woodshed publicly, I came down on you too hard for an issue that really wasn't a game breaker, whatever. We've all done that. And so for a boss to do that to an employee is huge. Yeah. It's huge.
Yeah. So and then saying, I'm sorry, but I might have. Come on, that's weak. I'm sorry, I was rude. I don't like my tone. I'm sorry, I embarrassed you in front of others. It's humiliating, but you know what? Humbling is okay. Sometimes we need to blow up the ego and get a little bit more humility.
I completely agree with that. I completely agree. But I'll just say a couple other things about the words themselves.
Dedicated.
Yeah, that's the last. But unselfish. The only thing I would add there is, I know all dealerships or sales departments or F&I departments, they're not going to do a foundation to help employees in need. That's not necessarily what I mean. But being unselfish means thinking of yourself less. You're not thinking less of yourself. That's self-deprecation. But just like you said, know whether one of their family members has cancer. Maybe do something about it. Get them contacts. It doesn't have to be money. It can be time. It can be resources. It can be reinforcement. Whatever the gift is you need to give, be unselfish with it. And we've all had great bosses who do that well, and some that just don't get it. Yeah. And then dedicated. The thing I do want to say that's really important, if people want to execute on this, I'm always available. You can post my website or contact me on LinkedIn. There's a whole process to be dedicated to this, because most organizations, they say, oh, I want to have a loving culture. Here's my 4 values. Go do it. That always fails. And that's what's done 80% of the time. There's only, according to Gallup, there's only about 10% of companies who really implement it. And what I mean by that is, at a high level, you've got to define your values so people can be taught. So the second step, you have to teach people what you mean by love and patience and kindness and truthfulness. But then you have to measure it, which we did. And then once you measure it, you review the numbers, just like you review financials. Like this F&I department's got really low people scores. The service department's kicking it. What's the difference? Let's figure out why they're doing so much better, as an example. And then the last thing is to reward it. Most people, like I see this a lot where dealers are so, my culture is really important, but then they promote the sales manager who's a good salesperson, but horrible with people and doesn't really know how to lead and foster people. And then the culture starts to go down. So it's just really important to promote people based on adhering to these B goals, these 7 words. And that actually, if God gives me enough years and time, that's going to be my second book, is to teach people more the execution part, not just what the words mean, because a lot of people struggle with how to really execute it well. So, but that's a high level of this, very high level. Obviously, if people want more, they can go to Amazon or Apple, iTunes. I read the book though, so be careful.
It's great. One thing about Joel is not only is he super accomplished, but he's so humble, and you can hear it. I mean, he's a man of character, man of faith, and he's got this $1 million smile. You can't see it if you're on Apple, but he's an incredible human. So I just want to tell you, if you're a business listening to this, I got your back. And Joel and I are actually in discussion about how I can serve Joel on this, but also serve clients. And what I mean by that is I do masterminds, right? I do these 12-week boot camps. This is the perfect culture-driven content to put into business. And I've been around automotive for 40 years, so I want to put it in dealerships. And I've told Joel this. I'm very excited about this, and we're walking through it. But I just want to tell you that we are here for you. We want to be able to do that for you. If you're interested in that, either reach out to Joel or myself. And I would love to see how I can take those 12 weeks with you and not only do it as a group, but also one-on-ones. Take all of these one-on-ones so that you can look at all these patience, kindness, trusting, unselfish, truthful, forgiving, and dedicated for yourself. And I guarantee you, your life at home will be better too, right? Unbelievable. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I will add too, Bart, I appreciate those comments. I've seen dealers very successfully implement some aspect of what we're talking about. Like I worked with the Sarah Group in Michigan or Don Flo in North Carolina. So I told some negative stories, but man, there are lights out there in the dealership business that are really doing it right. And they're incredibly successful. So again, don't believe that lie that you have to be a jerk, to get the best out of people.
Right.
That's just,
you know what? I like trying to begot like. And what I think that's one reason we came together. There was something in our spirits that said, hey, how can we serve each other? And I thank you so much for that. But I think it's also true in dealerships. I think if you're a dealership and you're not at that place where you're at a place where you don't care about your people, I'm sure you're still good people. But if that's how you operate your business, that's you. That's up to you. But again, a lot of people listening to this and say, I'm a good person and I want to lead with love. I don't know if I like that word love, but I understand it's about service. I know it's about the verb. I get that. I want to lead that way. I want that culture. And I believe that because of that, there's a lot of hand raisers that would like to see how this could work in their stores. I will tell you that's my favorite scripture. I've had the opportunity to officiate 2 of my son's weddings. And like every other officiant, guess what I got to do? I got to do it on 1 Corinthians 13.
You got the big snail verse.
Yeah, I want them to love with the verb love with their spouses the way that they can be very proud of when they're sitting in their rocking chair.
What an honor. What a huge honor to officiate your own
I've
wedding.
been blessed, man.
I didn't know you were a pastor. Do I have to call you Pastor Bart?
No, no. I am a ministry leader though for celebrate recovery. But and I also got to bring introduce my mama to Jesus a week before she died.
Oh my God.
So I'm done, man. I'm like,
She literally was not a believer her whole life until her death. Oh my God.
I can't tell you, Joel, how many times I'd say, Mom, let me tell you about Jesus. Oh, Bart, that's great for you, but that's not right now. Some other time. a week before she died, we're having lunch from some dive place right next door to where she lived. I brought it in. I sat down and I said, "Can we talk about Jesus?" Yeah. So there's more to that story. I'll tell you sometime.
Oh, well, yeah, I like to hear that. That's
true story. It's a true story.
Good for you. What an honor. Well, man, it's been great. I really have enjoyed this, and hopefully we got something for your listeners to
absolutely
and chew on a little bit and challenge the way we all think about leadership and what our calling really is. It's, selling cars is important, and we need to do it. We need to hit our numbers. We absolutely have to hit our numbers, but there's, I think, a better, broader too.
There's so many of us that go home at night, not us anymore, but us in the past that go home at night. We're not nice to our wives or our kids, and marriages break up. And I think that it's our responsibility as leaders to make sure that they love their experience at the dealership, and they take that. Then you said it in your book. You wanted to be the same person at work that you were at home. And that is the ultimate.
No, you're right.
Goal, right?
So many men or women, I shouldn't say, both sides come home and they're angered from what happened at work, and then they take it out on their families. It's just a vicious, bad, negative cycle. And man, if nothing else, like what you said earlier, the world is so caustic and so label oriented and just so hateful towards anybody who doesn't hold your label. It's so caustic and it's so unhealthy. Yeah. And we can be a light to change that direction.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you, my friend. Thanks for stretching out your calendar for me today. It's been so fun, and we're going to do this again. You and I have already talked about that, so we'll go deeper next time. But if you want any more information, reach out to me or reach out to Joel. You'll have all his information. Yeah, email Joel.
Joel@joelmanby.com. That's also my website is joelmanby.com. But again, they can reach out on LinkedIn with my name, and the book's available on Amazon, like we said, anywhere you want to go.
Love Works, silver cover.
All right, buddy. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
God bless. Thank you so much.
Take care. We'll talk again soon.